The street smelled of dust and autumn air, with faint traces of coffee and bread from nearby shops mixing with the earthy scent of fallen leaves. The sun was beginning its slow descent, painting everything in a soft, amber glow. At the corner of that quiet street, a woman worked tirelessly, her hands moving quickly, arranging apples with care on a small wooden cart. She was not wealthy, not even close, but she carried herself with a dignity that only comes from necessity and perseverance. Every day she faced the world with a quiet strength, selling her fruits to strangers, smiling politely even when life made it hard to do so. This wasn't just business, it was survival. Her eyes flicked occasionally to the street, scanning passers-by, judging whether someone would purchase from her today, and whether they would respect the small space she carved out in the world. It was a delicate balance, assertive enough to protect herself and her cart, humble enough to appeal to the kindness in others. She had learned over the years that dignity is maintained not through fear or intimidation, but through consistency, self-respect, and unwavering focus. Each apple she arranged, each smile she offered, was a small act of courage, a testament to her refusal to let life break her spirit. People often walk past those who struggle without seeing the strength that exists in the simple act of perseverance. To an unobservant eye, she might appear vulnerable, even fragile. She is a single mother, working long hours in the sun, earning barely enough to keep a roof over her child's head. But vulnerability does not equal weakness. The true measure of her courage was in the hours spent standing in the elements, interacting with strangers, handling insults, and yet never losing her composure. Her resilience was not loud. It did not demand applause. It existed quietly, persistently, and powerfully. That quiet dignity was about to be tested in a way that few could anticipate. A group of men approached, their steps heavy with entitlement. At the front was the Don's son, a young man raised in comfort and arrogance, the kind of person who equates power with fear, status with respect. He had not seen her before, and in that moment he judged her not by her heart or her actions, but by her circumstances. She was to him an object of amusement, a challenge meant to highlight his own dominance. He smirked, glanced at his companions, and stepped closer to her cart, his gaze dismissive and cruel. The first words he uttered cut through the evening's calm like a blade. They were mocking, designed to belittle, to provoke a reaction that would satisfy his ego. The men around him laughed, reinforcing his sense of superiority. But she did not flinch. She had learned early in life that fear is often contagious, and showing it gives others power over you. Instead, she kept her head high, her movements deliberate, her hands steady as she continued her work, acknowledging the interaction but refusing to give it the weight it sought. It is remarkable how often people mistake dignity for weakness. They see a lack of immediate retaliation, a refusal to escalate, and interpret it as submission. But in truth, strength can be quiet, courage can be composed. The mother at the apple cart understood this instinctively. Every insult hurled at her, every mocking gesture, was met with measured calm. Her strength was not in confrontation. It was in her unwavering commitment to maintain her space, her composure, and her humanity in the face of unnecessary cruelty. The Don's son did not recognize that true power does not rely on oppression. He did not understand that there is a kind of resilience forged in adversity that cannot be intimidated by wealth, influence, or aggression. As he reached forward, his hand brushing against the cart in a threatening gesture, the mother's gaze met his steadily. There was no anger, no pleading, only the unmistakable presence of someone who knows her worth and refuses to be diminished. Her eyes communicated what words could not. You may have privilege, but I have dignity, and it is not yours to take. This moment exemplifies a lesson often lost in our fast, moving world, that strength is not always loud, visible, or conventional. It exists in the quiet acts of endurance, in the courage to face daily challenges with integrity, in the refusal to let the world define one's value. She had no guard, no allies visible in the immediate scene, and yet she commanded respect through presence alone. She understood that the power of composure and the force of unshakable self-respect often outweigh brute strength or coercion. The young man, blinded by entitlement, underestimated her. He could not see the depth of her character, the fire hidden behind her calm. He assumed that material comfort and social status gave him the right to intimidate. to assert dominance over someone weaker in appearance. But he did not realize that there are forces that transcend visibility and perception. Strength, honor, and resilience often live in the shadows, unnoticed until circumstances reveal their magnitude. As the tension rose, she kept her body language relaxed yet alert, hands hovering near the cart, ready to protect her livelihood if necessary, but unwilling to strike first. Her strength was moral and psychological, rooted in the knowledge that she deserved respect, that her work mattered, and that the life she built for herself and her child was worth defending. Every act of her perseverance was a declaration. I will not be belittled, I will not be broken, and I will not relinquish my dignity. It is often in these moments, when no one else is present to witness, that courage is most potent. Not in spectacle, but in quiet, deliberate action. She did not have wealth, guns, or immediate reinforcements, but she possessed something far more formidable, an unshakable belief in her own worth. And that belief radiates, detectable by those attuned to the essence of humanity, even if invisible to the unobservant eye. The scene escalated as the young man's companions joined in, laughing, pushing, trying to provoke anger or fear. But she maintained her calm, her eyes never leaving his, her movements slow and intentional. She did not need to escalate. Her presence alone was enough to unsettle the bravado. There is a lesson here about human perception. Power without compassion is fragile. The aggressors assumed dominance, but true strength cannot be imposed by cruelty or intimidation. They would soon learn this truth, though not immediately, and not in the way they expected. As the confrontation seemed poised to erupt, a subtle vibration in the air drew attention. Engines approaching from the street, low and steady at first, then louder, more insistent. The mother, without moving, felt a shift in the energy around her. Something was coming. Those who rely solely on brute confidence often do not notice these subtleties, but intuition, honed by years of struggle, allows one to sense the presence of forces that will intervene. The Hell's Angels arrived, their motorcycles cutting through the evening haze, headlights piercing the shadows, engines roaring with authority. They did not shout or wave, they arrived with purpose. The young man and his companions froze, their laughter replaced by confusion and fear. They had assumed that power was theirs to wield, that the world would bend to their whim. They had not anticipated that the moral and familial force behind this woman would manifest in a very visible and immediate way. Her calm persisted even as the bikers encircled the scene. There was no need for words or dramatic gestures. The situation had already shifted. Her quiet strength, her dignity in the face of harassment, had summoned protection that transcended expectation. It was a reminder that courage is not always physical, it is moral, emotional, and relational. It calls forth allies, sometimes unseen, sometimes underestimated, to uphold what is right. The aggressor's arrogance crumbled in the face of reality. They were confronted not by the woman directly, but by the force she represented, integrity, perseverance, and the invisible network of loyalty that surrounded her. They realized too late that appearances had deceived them. Strength often hides in the most unexpected forms, and those who fail to see it are humbled by circumstance. This scene, though brief in real time, carried lessons that extend far beyond the immediate conflict. The mother's courage was revealed not through violence, but through steadfastness. She demonstrated that dignity and resilience are powerful tools, that self-respect can command outcomes even without confrontation, and that moral authority can shift dynamics faster than any display of force. The engines faded into the distance, leaving the mother once again at her cart, arranging apples as if nothing had happened. But everything had changed. The aggressors had learned a lesson about underestimating others. The mother had reinforced the quiet strength that sustains her daily life, and the street itself seemed subtly altered, as if the world had acknowledged that courage and dignity cannot be ignored, no matter how quietly they assert themselves. Every day she would return to that cart, every transaction a small act of endurance, every smile a testament to her unwavering spirit. And every passerby, whether they noticed or not, witnessed a woman whose strength was not in shouting, fighting, or dominating, but in surviving with grace, holding her head high and living her truth fully. Courage is often hidden in plain sight. It does not always roar. It does not always fight first. Sometimes it persists quietly, steadily, and unassumingly until the right moment reveals its full power. And in that moment, everyone who underestimated it comes to understand that true strength has many faces, some of them soft, some of them silent, and some of them impossibly resilient. She returned to her work, her heart steady, her mind clear, and her dignity intact, knowing that the world had witnessed, however briefly, the strength that lies in perseverance and the quiet courage of the human spirit. And that is the power of dignity in struggle. The moment the Don's son realized he had misjudged the situation was almost imperceptible, a flicker of doubt crossing his arrogant expression. He had approached the poor single mother with the assumption that his wealth, privilege, and the power of his father's name were enough to intimidate anyone. But he was about to learn a lesson that many in positions of unearned authority never truly grasp. Power without compassion is nothing more than fragility disguised as dominance. As the tension mounted, the mother remained calm, her hands steady, her gaze unwavering. She did not shout, she did not threaten, she simply existed in her truth. It was this very presence, this quiet insistence on dignity, that triggered a shift in the energy of the moment. Those who rely solely on force to assert control often fail to recognize the subtle forms of strength that exist in others, the kind of strength built from endurance, integrity, and moral conviction. In those few seconds, the Don's son began to feel a weight he could not comprehend. The moral imbalance he had created by threatening someone weaker, someone without immediate power, hung in the air like a tangible force. It was in that space, that pause before chaos erupted, that he sensed something greater was at play. He could not see it clearly yet, but instinct whispered that the rules he relied upon, entitlement, fear, intimidation, were no longer sufficient. Then came the sound that would forever change the evening, the low hum of engines approaching from the street, growing steadily louder, a presence that demanded attention. It was not an angry mob, it was something more precise, more deliberate. The Hell's Angels arrived, and with them came an unspoken message. Respect cannot be assumed, and cruelty toward the vulnerable will not go unnoticed. The son and his companions froze, confusion and fear momentarily replacing the arrogance that had defined them until now. The mother, still calm at her cart, did not need to explain, to justify, or to act. Her courage, her perseverance, and her unshakable dignity had already summoned the forces that would restore balance. The Hell's Angels' intervention was not driven by spectacle or desire for attention. It was guided by a deeper code, a moral compass that recognizes when injustice is inflicted upon someone who cannot defend themselves. They were the embodiment of accountability, responding not to provocation but to principle. This confrontation illustrated a profound truth about power. It is meaningless without conscience. Those who wield influence through fear or dominance alone may command obedience temporarily, but they do not inspire respect. True power, by contrast, carries responsibility, empathy, and the understanding that one's actions ripple far beyond immediate intent. The Don's son had exercised influence thoughtlessly, and the consequences were both immediate and instructive. As the Hell's Angels positioned themselves between the aggressors and the mother, the lesson became clear. Authority and might are hollow without compassion. Respect is not granted by intimidation, nor is it bought with wealth. It is earned through deeds, through honor, and through the willingness to protect those who cannot defend themselves. The mother's quiet bravery had made visible what the son could not see, that power without integrity is fragile and easily dismantled. The aggressors attempted to regain control, but the dynamic had already shifted irreversibly. They were no longer the ones dictating the terms. The balance of moral authority had been restored by actions and presence that transcended conventional definitions of power. Every second that passed reinforced the truth that leadership and influence are measured not by the ability to dominate, but by the courage to do what is right. In the aftermath, the mother continued her work as if nothing had happened, her composure intact, her dignity unbroken. But the Don's son carried the memory of that evening with him, an indelible lesson in humility and accountability. He had confronted someone he assumed was powerless, only to discover that true strength lies not in domination but in character, courage, and the unseen bonds that demand respect. Power without compassion is not strength, it is vulnerability in disguise. The mother's story reminds us that the way we treat others, especially those we underestimate, reveals our true nature. The Hell's Angels intervention was a vivid demonstration that justice and protection often come from unexpected sources. But the underlying principle is universal. Respect and kindness are inseparable from authentic strength. By the time the motorcycles disappeared into the distance, the lesson had been made unmistakably clear. The son had learned that arrogance can be dismantled not through confrontation alone, but through the exposure of moral imbalance. True authority is validated by empathy, and cruelty toward the vulnerable invites correction. In that brief, intense moment, the dynamics of power, compassion, and responsibility were etched into everyone's consciousness, an enduring reminder of what real strength looks like. And in that lesson, the mother's quiet courage was amplified, her dignity not only preserved but elevated. The world had glimpsed a simple yet profound truth. Influence without conscience is meaningless, and the protection of the vulnerable is the truest measure of power.